Welcome to the Visionary Spotlight, the Dream Team edition, where you'll meet the experts who can help shortcut your business's success. From web developers to social media managers, you'll find out what they do, if it makes sense for you, the results they produce, and how to vet and choose the right dream team to create the growth you envision. I'm Emily Hammel-Shaver of Lumos Communications, and today I'm thrilled to be speaking with Dara Skolnick, an incredibly talented WordPress web developer. Dara works with a wide range of clients, but has a soft spot for creatives, small businesses, and nonprofits, people who love what they do and strive to make a positive impact. Dara is also my #1 go-to whenever I'm putting together a website team for clients who need custom WordPress development. She's also a fantastic educator who teaches workshops and consults on tech, coding, and all things web. Dara, welcome to the Dream Team Spotlight.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be doing this with you.
And I'm so excited to pick your brain. I could go on and on about what an expert you are. Literally right before we started recording, you showed me a shortcut for how to turn on Do Not Disturb on my computer. And I'm talking to you on the MacBook Pro that you picked out for me and told me to buy. So
This is true.
you are my tech guru. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Sure. So I am a web developer and sometimes web designer too. We will talk about the difference between those. I'm from Toronto and I've been running my business for 10 years now, which is wild. It is wild. I build websites, like you said, for people and businesses and organizations, and have a definite soft spot for people who are putting good out into the world. And I just want to help them do what they do the best they can. So I build them a strategic marketing tool that will help them and their organization. And as we'll get into, there's a definite art and a science to this work. So there's like strategy and numbers and performance, and then there's making something that's easy. Like easy to use, easy for the clients, like that feels good and feels like them. So it's definitely a mixing of many things.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, I will say, are so good at both amplifying their message, sort of that's an art and a science too, right? The strategy that's behind a mission like that. But you're also so great at the behind the scenes stuff that has to happen for a website to run really well.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
I think we both have that mix of like art and science and like being very strategy focused, which is also why I like working with you. So, it all just works out well.
So, and you and I have talked behind the scenes about this conversation specifically because we do work together really well, but we know that this is also a really confusing topic for a lot of people. There are so many options out there. There's platforms like there's WordPress, there's Squarespace, and many more. And there are all of these different aspects of web design and development, and it can be really daunting for people when it's time to jump in and do a huge website update. It's really hard to know what somebody actually really needs, doesn't need. It's hard for people to figure out where their investment is going to be put to the best use, and people want to be economical with what they're spending, but they want the absolute best that their budget can buy. So I would love for us to unpack this for people, all the different options, and demystify what is the right thing for them. So first, let's talk about what is web design.
Yes, that is a great question because people sometimes see design and development as something that's interchangeable. And while sometimes some of us can do both, they are two different things. So web design, which, like I say, can be done by a designer developer or by somebody who just does design, is the visual design of a website that's not interactive. So you can think of it like a painting you can hang on the wall. Like you can look at it, but you can't do anything with it. You can't click it. You can't interact with it. This is usually done in a program like Figma or Adobe XD or Sketch, which that probably doesn't matter if you're not technical, but so didn't even really need to add that. But basically it's the visual representation of what the website will look like, but it's not like a living thing. You can't scroll through it. You can't click on it. It's just like a preview of what is to come.
Exactly. And so now talk about the development piece. So that's the web design is this is what it looks like. And then the
Yeah.
development piece is here's how it works.
Exactly. So the development piece is writing the code that brings the design from something that's just like a flat thing you look at to something you can actually interact with. So that's everything from the visual. So that's writing code to determine things like the colors and the fonts and the animations. That's also things like pulling the data into the website. So when people write blog posts, like how does it get from the blog in WordPress to actually showing up on the page? So the developer will write the code that will pull it from like the content management system into the actual website. And it's also, there's a lot of strategic focus in dev as well. So that's things like writing code that will make the page load faster or make it accessible to people who are using screen readers or just navigating by the keyboard. It's also making decisions about how the website's going to be updated. And there are ways to make this easier or more difficult. So I think like one of the misconceptions about development is that it's just like very technical and it's like, you're just writing some code and that it's just building it. But in building it, you can build it in so many different ways. And some of those ways are more client friendly and performant than others. So basically, there's a lot of decision making that goes into it that's very invisible, but also really important to how the website turns out.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that has made this both easier for people, users who need a new website, it's made it easier for them, but also more difficult to understand what dev actually is, are these like web or page builder platforms that in essence combine the two. And so people now think web design is just like getting to like Squarespace, but in fact, everything behind the scenes in Squarespace has already been developed, or you can custom develop a Squarespace site as well to make it function in a different way than it was intended to. So can you talk a little bit about what those like, is that the right term? Like a web builder or a page builder? Is that the right phrase?
Yeah, a page builder. Yeah, that's like, especially when you're talking about like WordPress page builders like Beaver Builder or Elementor, like, yeah, page builder is definitely the right term to use for that. For Squarespace, Squarespace, you could talk about it like that too, because it has like a bunch of pre-built components that you're just like mixing and matching. But yeah, in something like Squarespace, like that's the thing, like 98 to 100% of the development has been done for you. But if you can write your own CSS, you can override some of that and make it a lot cooler than what Squarespace intended. So there are a lot of platforms that have this automated. So you might think like, but why do I even need a developer at all? But like, we'll talk about like, if you want to go beyond what these platforms can offer, then you need somebody to actually build it.
Exactly. Okay. So there's web design, which is what it looks like. There's the development, which is how everything that you're seeing is functioning.
Yeah.
It's not just a painting on a wall. And then there are some platforms that can sort of combine the two and make it a little bit faster, easier to build something, but it's not as customized.
Exactly.
How does, so you talked about a web designer is a different kind of skill set than a developer. So what happens when you've got web design that's been custom created and you have development? How does that marriage work?
It can work in multiple ways, but the best way for it to work is when a web designer and a web developer are working together right from the very beginning. Sometimes a web designer will just like design things without a developer in mind, and that can be a bit dangerous because they could make decisions that aren't easily codable or maybe don't work well on mobile devices. And then if they just hire a random developer to develop it, one, the developer might not be the right person for that job. Two, the developer might say like, hey, this isn't doable. Oh no. And then it's like just disappointing for everybody. So the best way to do it is to have a web designer and developer together, like from the very beginning of the project, from the first strategic decisions. Then when the web designer is making like wireframes and the higher fidelity designs, which just means what it's going to look like in the end. If a developer is reviewing that all along the way, you're going to get something that works really well and is just going to be great for everyone. And then there's going to be no moments where the designer promises something that's not doable to the client. So yeah, I think like a partnership is just definitely the way to go there.
Yeah, I like what you said too about having to think about what a decision on a desktop could look, how it could look differently on mobile. And then the developer is truly the person who's making sure that that can happen. And so there are so many different aspects of how a design moves through development to the site you see.
And some designers are more specific than others. So some designers will make design like full mobile design, full desktop design, maybe even a tablet design. What's more typical in my experience, though, is that the designer will make basically a full desktop design, maybe show me like what the menu and footer should look like on mobile and be like, figure the rest out. And luckily, like I'm pretty flexible and I can just figure that out. So sometimes that falls onto the designer, sometimes it falls onto the developer, but it all just like, I think the biggest thing that sometimes I have trouble explaining to clients is just how many tiny little invisible decisions are being made. And it's important to put that trust in the right person, because you want somebody who's going to be really, really deliberate about all of this.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's why we're having this conversation with you. So now that we know what's what, let's people narrow down what they actually need and talk about sort of the best options for different businesses. So, there are, so for example, on Squarespace, you could also just buy a template. You and I don't work with a templated site. So it's like, what you see is what you get, and you pop your content in there. But out of curiosity, when do you think that a site like that is a good fit for a business?
That is a good question. So, I think if you're going to go the templated route, you probably want to go with Squarespace over WordPress. Like WordPress templates kind of like bring out the worst of WordPress, where sometimes it feels like it's a little more difficult to update. You want to like change like something, you want to change something in the layout, and like you literally can't, because like all the content is locked into place. So generally, if somebody's coming to me for like a WordPress templated site, well, I haven't done those in years, so I would send them to somebody else anyway. But that would be a good use case for using Squarespace, because at least Squarespace gives you the options to change like the fonts and colors and stuff a little bit easier. So I'd say somebody who's like really at the starter stages of their business, like in the first couple of years, they don't have a big budget, because you can do like a templated site on a very small budget. So yeah, real lower budget projects, you don't have a lot of custom needs. That would be the time to do a templated site. Now, if you know for sure that you're going to want to be on WordPress eventually, then that's like the only time I'd say like go for a WordPress templated site, because it's just easier if your posts are already loaded into WordPress and like all the images are there, because then it can transfer easier to another site like a few years down the line when you're ready to upgrade. But otherwise, if you're sort of in the template zone, I often say like, have you heard of Squarespace? Because I think that's a better match most of the time for like the beginner new type of businesses.
Great. So if you're ready to plug and play, you've got a starter budget, you've got to start somewhere. That's a great place to do it over on Squarespace. So
yeah, exactly.
What about there's like a sort of semi-custom realm with web design and web development. When do you think that sort of semi-custom realm is the right fit for a business, depending on their sort of goals and challenges and their pro WordPress?
Yeah, so a semi-custom build, just to clarify, that is when you're using a page builder. So something like Beaver Builder or Elementor or something like that, that does have like drag and drop components like Squarespace, but is much more customizable. So you can have like pre-built layouts, you can save templates. So it's sort of like Squarespace, but a lot more customizable than that. So I think the best case when you're doing that is when you have sort of like a medium-sized budget. So let's say under 15 to 20,000, and you want to have design, development, and everything in that budget. And you don't have a lot of you don't have like a ton of different content types. You don't have
say more about that, what that means, content types.
Yes, that I should clarify. So on WordPress, you have by default two types of content. You have posts and you have pages. So pages are like, the static content like about and contact and information. The posts are like news or in your blog. Now, on a custom site, so we're kind of going a little bit around. On a custom site, you can make tons of different content types. So an example is a project I was working on recently, which was for a medical nonprofit. It had patient stories in addition to the blog. It had a list of registries. It had webinar videos. I'm forgetting some, but like there were just lots of different types of content. On another website I worked on recently, there were news posts, but there were also projects and initiatives and downloadable resources. So you can have all these different types of content that are different from each other and that display differently.
Yeah.
And on a custom site, you can sort of do whatever you want with that. But on a semi-custom site, you can have those too, but there's a lot more limitations to like how that gets displayed.
Yes.
So, you have like a few choices you can choose from. You can have like a grid of like 3 posts across, like the standard blog. You can have them sort of going down the page. Like whatever the builder builds in for you, you can choose from and then customize. Whereas when you're doing custom, you can do like anything you want.
Right.
So it's, and for a lot of businesses, the semi-custom option is awesome. Like you and I have worked on a couple of projects like that. And an example of when semi-custom is better than something like Squarespace, because you might think like, okay, they're both sort of drag and drop, like what's different? So an example is one of the sites we worked on had a store locator, and on Squarespace, like that just doesn't exist. And although you can like visually tweak Squarespace if you have somebody who codes with CSS, you can't like add functionality like that just doesn't exist in the ecosystem. But with WordPress, you can add on like all sorts of things.
That's a great example.
Yeah, like WordPress is very extendable. It's kind of like Squarespace is a bucket of Lego, but you can paint the blocks, but you can't add new blocks. And the semi-custom sites are like, you start with the box of Lego, but you can add more sets to them. Yeah. And then the custom site is like, you're sculpting the blocks out of clay yourself, and you're not even like starting with what Lego gave you.
Exactly. So, right. That's a really interesting distinction. So right. Semi-custom can be, and using a page builder as the foundation that is then customized is a great fit for lots of businesses, especially those who have like fairly informational sites, but then need new components like a store locator. So we're talking about the Red Sled wine.
Yeah.
Which is so fun. Okay. So then say there's a business that's like, I think I might need more than that. Talk about when to know whether a fully custom designed and developed site is the right solution for that kind of business.
Yeah. So I was sort of like getting at that before with like the different content types. So if you have like needs that are really customized, or you want to have like information that's filtered in a different way. So for example, like in a project I just did, there was like an archive of projects and initiatives, and it's filtered by category, by topic, by status, whether it's active or not active, and those kind of things just like don't exist on the page builder side. Like I had to build that myself. Yeah. So if you want to integrate much more seamlessly with third-party vendors for different functionality, custom is much better. So an example of this is 2 different nonprofit sites I did. One was Page Builder, one was totally custom. The donation pages are a perfect example. So on the semi-custom site, I was able to like pull in the donation widget from the company they were using to process their donations. And it works, it's totally fine, but like you can kind of tell it's like a frame on the site that's been pulled in from another site. Like it's not quite styled the same way. It works, but it doesn't look quite as customized. Whereas on the custom side, I was able to actually code like a super custom donation form that uses all of the website styling, and it connects seamlessly to their platform. So it just feels like it's 100% custom and built in, and like you're not using like sort of a third-party thing dragged into the middle of your site. So there's a level of like smoothness and customness and professionalism that I think you can only get with a custom site when you have like more custom functionality needed. And also if you just want like a more out of the box custom design. Like there's a lot you can do with a semi-custom site. Like you can have like little animations where things are like fading up or like bouncing in, and like that's great. But it's kind of like the sky's the limit when it comes to custom.
Yeah.
So you can just get a lot more beyond the options that are given to you.
That makes a lot of sense. When a prospective client comes to you, how do you help them figure out what they need? Do you just ask them a ton of different questions?
Yeah. So I asked them questions about like what on their site isn't working for them. What are they hoping to do with the new site? And also sometimes budget is a consideration too. Like if they just don't have the budget for custom, there's so much you can do with semi-custom.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like sort of budget, functionality, what they're hoping to achieve. Just all sorts, basically asking them a ton of different questions, and then I will make a recommendation, or sometimes give a couple of different options, but usually there is one option that is better than the others for a particular client. So it's just asking them lots of different things.
Yeah. So if somebody's unsure, they can have a conversation with you, and you'll help
exactly.
Educate them.
And there's certain tells also that make custom a better option. Like, for example, if they're really trying to increase their website performance, if they're like, we want a site that loads as quickly as possible, performance is super important. Custom is always going to have an edge there. A lot of page builders sort of like, they can be great, but they also sometimes like pull in extra bits of code that we don't necessarily need. And that can slow down the loading of the site a tiny bit. And there are things we can do to speed it up, but like a custom site will just be sleeker and leaner. So it all has to do with like what is the end goal.
Perfect.
And striking the balance there.
Yeah. I know that one end goal that is really important to clients is the content management system that's in place. And that's so for people who don't know, a content management system, or a CMS, is the system that just sort of determines how easy or difficult it is to update a site's text, images, layout, like the content. And WordPress used to have a bit of a bad rap for being hard to manage. And I will admit I was quite biased against WordPress initially for that reason. But Dara, you were actually the one that helped me see that has changed over the years. Can you talk a tiny bit about what people can expect from the content management system, the CMS, on WordPress?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And it also can vary from developer to developer as well. So a lot of the decisions you make during dev really affect how easy or difficult the website is to update for clients. So if you're doing a semi-custom website with a page builder, that's pretty visual, like it's like drag and drop components. What the developer can do to make that easier is like save out reusable layouts. So there's like a little save tab where they can just drag and drop in layouts that are used a lot. So you kind of are giving them like the building blocks to build any new page themselves. Or, if they're like editing a page and they're like, I want a testimonial in here, like we've already made something for them that they can just drag in. It'll look really nice and branded. So, but not everybody does that though, is sort of the thing. So like sometimes somebody will use a page builder, but not build out all these pre-made layouts and pieces. So then like clients are a little bit more on their own. So like one thing I always recommend doing if you're hiring a developer is not just to look at their portfolio from the front end, but to ask them like, what do your sites look like on the admin side? Like, what will it look like if I'm editing the site? They might not be able to give you like admin access to a client's website, but they could show you screenshots, or they could do screen sharing, and they can show you like, this is what the editing side looks like. Because that's a side you don't see from the front end, but it's so important for your business, especially if you're going to be maintaining the site yourself, which a lot of my clients are. Like they want to be able to like edit a typo or swap out an image and not have to call me, and nor should they. If they want to, great, like I'm here, but they shouldn't have to, So yeah, with a page builder, it's like there are saved drag and droppable components. With a custom site, the way WordPress used to work was that there was basically like an editor window. It just looked like a big square, or a big rectangle, and you would just have to type in it. And we would have to do really sketchy things back in the day, like put code in there, which is horrible. It's a terrible experience. Then we started writing custom fields where we would say, okay, you don't have to write any code anymore. And then we'd give people a lot of different fields. So for example, with a testimonial as an example, we'd give them like the person's name, their title, here's where you upload the image. So that would make it a little bit easier. A little bit easier than like write code in the editor, which is awful.
That's what I remember seeing was like, these are your three options: your name, the content, and it was like,
yeah,
what if I want more than this?
Exactly. The good thing is that WordPress, I think it's maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, came out with a brand new editor. So they said like, okay, clearly this like one editor window is not doing it. And like writing custom fields is great, but it's a little bit limited. So they made a new visual editor where when you're editing it on the back end, it looks very close to what you're doing on the front end. And it gives you all sorts of options, with like colors and fonts and like different styles. And this, I know it's going to sound like this is similar to a page builder site. And in some ways it is, but the difference is that as a developer, you can make your own blocks and add them. And you can also customize WordPress's built-in blocks. So you can add all sorts of new functionality to a client site that's 100% custom to them. But again, the developer does make a difference because I always make sure that all of the custom blocks are just as styled in the editor as they are on the front end. But some devs are still like using those fields and you can't even see the preview of it when you're editing. And like some devs still like the old way better. And they say they disable the block editor. And I'm like, no, don't do that. I mean, and of course, all of this is opinion. There could be somebody who disagrees. I think the block editor is much more user-friendly and clients have had like really good feedback about it. But that's why asking a prospective developer, like, what is the content entry going to be like is such an important question.
That I love that. So asking them to make sure it's part of the project overall, but then also asking to see it is such a great tip. And you and I both strongly believe that a business does not need to be beholden to somebody else just to update their site. And so I love that you create a system that enables clients to evolve their sites on their own, which they should be able to do. So so it's WordPress changed some, but really you changed my perspective about what was possible behind the scenes in WordPress. And I'm really grateful for that because I think that everybody should be able to invest in an incredible site and have the power to keep it moving on their own and then, give a call and lean on the developer when they want to make big changes, but they should not be trapped forever.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I honestly feel like it's a measure of success if a client, we part ways, everything's great, and then I don't hear from them for a couple of years and they're still updating their site.
Yeah.
Like, if they can just run with it themselves and they don't even need me, like, that's how I know I've been really successful.
That's great. I love that.
Even though I'm happy to hear from people, obviously, but but they shouldn't have to rely on me.
Yeah, if they're flying on their own and their site is working great and they're able to keep their site working great and they don't need you for several years, that is a measure of success. And I'm sure there are people listening or reading this that are like, yes, I don't want to be beholden to that relationship for, nothing against the person on the other end, like you or me,
of course.
But autonomy in evolving your business, your marketing machine, et cetera, that's so important. And I will not go down the path of talking about how frustrating it is to sort of be beholden to somebody and not have any power over updating your site. And it's very expensive, all of those things. So love how you do it. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about your zone of genius, which is specifically custom web development. Can you talk a little bit more about what are a few key results that fully custom web design and development can help achieve?
Yeah. So on top of being able to do stuff that's custom and cool and is just attention getting and different, Custom development will have better performance overall if it's coded properly. So that will increase your search engine rankings. That will keep users on your site for longer, because if they're not waiting, they can get around from place to place a lot easier. It can be more SEO oriented. So on top of just the performance, the site can be coded in a way that search engines like a little bit better. A lot of that though is content too. So just like a sidebar of sometimes people come to me and they're like, do you do SEO? And I'm like, yes and no. That has to be a marriage of content and development. So it's partially me, but not all me. Custom development can also achieve accessibility compliance a lot better. So that means things like people who are using screen readers to listen to websites because they can't see the website, people who are navigating the website by keyboard and they can't use a mouse, for example. When you're doing custom development, you can really keep that stuff in mind. And it's one of those things that's not only a good thing to do, but more and more places are introducing legislation that say your site has to be accessible. And when you're doing custom dev, you can just keep it in mind a little bit easier. There are certain components in the page builders that I'm I would just code that a different way. It's not it's awful, but it's not 100%. Whereas you can get a lot closer when you're coding it yourself. You can also probably have a much more future-proofed site if it's custom, because you're relying on fewer plugins. So plugins are extra bits of functionality that you can add onto the site. And the more you're relying on these bits and pieces that are coded by other people, the more likely it is that something could maybe break down. And then it's oh no, emergency, this thing broke on my site. Whereas when you're coding it all yourself, fewer things to break.
Yeah, let's talk more about plugins just briefly, because that's something I didn't think of. But again, I'm thinking back in my brain, that's also a bias that I used to have against WordPress, which is that great, you get a custom site, but now you're beholden to all these stupid plugins that you have to update. So it's my value is freedom, and I want to give that to my clients. So talk a little bit more about how plugins work and which types of sites sort of need them more than others.
Yeah. So you're never going to have a site with 0 plugins, but you can definitely narrow them down. First of all, if you're custom. Second of all, if you have a developer who knows how to do things on their own. So a plugin can be anything from adding that store locator. It can be an SEO plugin that lets you, add meta keywords and descriptions. WordPress has some of that built in, but not a lot. So essentially it just extends what WordPress does. Some plugins are great. One of them is one of them called Akismet filters content and form spam. So that's an example of a plugin that you really do want to have on your website, because it's a great idea and you don't want to have spam flying in your inbox all the time. And plugins can be anything from sometimes clients will want, a slideshow on their website. A custom developer can just build that right in. But if you don't have a custom developer, you have to add that in with an extra piece that's written by someone else, which also is not going to look visually quite as nice either. Another example of something that can be a plugin or can be custom coded is WordPress by default on a blog will just have previous and next. But some people want to have a load more button where it doesn't refresh the page. It just loads more stuff in. So if you don't know how to do that, you can put in a plugin called Ajax load more, and it just makes a nice button for you. But if you do know how to do that, you just don't need that plugin. So certain things a developer can write, but other things they probably can't. If you wanted to add an e-commerce shop on to your website, it's much I don't know anybody who's going to custom code. Well, somebody could, but no, it's not going to be me. So, adding a WooCommerce shop onto your website, it adds a lot of functionality. So plugins are everything from big stuff, a store locator, e-commerce, down to tiny things like a load more button. And I'd say the bigger things, pretty much any developer would use a plugin for, but the little things, custom dev can eliminate that. So the fewer plugins that you have on the site, generally speaking, the faster it's going to load.
Interesting. And then, okay, so and what I'm hearing is I don't need to be biased against plugins because some of them are great and necessary. And I can understand it's why build something from scratch if something fantastic has already been built and it's there to use. And doesn't require a lot of work to integrate and can be integrated well, etc. But
Yeah,
they do need
exactly.
to be updated sometimes, right?
Yes. Yeah. So there's like 3 ways to go about it. One is you go in and update yourself like once a month or so. 2 is that you can turn on auto update on most of these plugins. WordPress introduced that like a year or 2 ago. I don't like fairly recently. That goes okay most of the time, but once in a while you get a plugin update that like makes something look weird. So like just a tangent again, like that's where having a host that does daily backups for you is really important because you can roll it back if something happens. Then another option is some of these hosts will have a smart plugin updater. Like you can pay, I don't know, it's like maybe like $150 for the year, and like they will update it, but also like it will know if something weird happens and it will roll it back for you, which is kind of nice. Or you can pay somebody like a human to do the maintenance. So I guess that's 4 options.
So I know that you recommend hosting for sites, and I know that you happen to recommend a host that includes that rollback.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really nice to know as well, because even if it's not like a plugin going rogue, like what if you update your site and you just don't know how to get it back? It's really nice when you can just say, I want yesterday's version, click it, and in 2 minutes it's up.
Yeah.
So host, I always like to recommend like a host that will support a client going forward.
Yeah, and we've had that happen.
And also just like make them feel safer, you know, with their site.
Yeah, we've gotten the email where it was like, oops, I did something and I don't know how to undo it. And you were just like, no problem, beep.
Exactly.
Okay, so plugins are part of the game, nothing to be afraid of. Have an idea of, ask your developer how they're going to help you make sure they're going to stay updated. Is sort of
like exactly. Like there should be a plan either way. So whether you're DIYing it, whether you're paying them for maintenance, whether you have like, you know, whether your host is going to take care of it, it should be definitely part of the discussion. I mean, maybe not in like the first call, but absolutely like down the line.
yes.
Yeah, you just want to have a professional who is like future focused for you and is not just going to say, bye, get on that bus and I'll see you never.
Right. When it breaks, you can let me know. Right. Yeah, you want somebody who's, and just to clarify, like this doesn't have to be something like, sure, I know you, and I know plenty of developers who are say, happy to be on call to handle this for you once a month, or happy to be here if you want to update those things yourself. And if something looks a little weird after it's been updated, you let me know.
Like I only update plugins for a handful of clients.
Yeah.
Like most people just, you know, they take it and run with it.
Yeah, it's not a scary thing. You show them how it works and it's totally doable. Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, say somebody's like, all right, hearing about this, I need at least semi-custom, maybe I need a fully developed site. What should a client have in place before they're ready to talk with a web developer like you?
That is a great question. And I think that's something that clients should know about, because sometimes they come to me with nothing. And in a way, I should be almost one of the last people that they're coming to. So by that, I mean, if they don't have good copy and brand voice in place, which I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you, like genuinely having strategic copy and a brand strategy, like you should have that before you do a website for sure. Because otherwise, like you just don't know what you're trying to do. You don't know what the voice is. And sometimes clients will write their own copy. Sometimes it's fine. Other times it's like, this is not good. And you can make it super pretty, but it's still not good, because the content needs to speak to your prospective clients and it needs to like lead to them taking different actions. And if you're just not thinking that way, like your site's not going to be nearly as effective. So having good copy, having like a brand strategy, I'd say also having high quality photography, if possible, is really important before starting. Like photography can really elevate a site. And if you have great copy and great photography, I'd rather have somebody with those things in place, like on Squarespace, than having somebody with none of those things in place doing like a super custom site. Because having the foundations, I think, is just so important.
Mm-hmm. And And ideally, in a perfect world, they're coming to you and they're saying, we have a web designer we like, or we'd love for you to recommend one.
Yeah. So, yeah, and people come to me in all sorts of ways. Sometimes even a designer will hire me directly instead of the business themselves. Sometimes the business will come to me and they will need a recommendation and I can put together that team. Other times I take the design on.
Yep.
Depending just on my availability and the project itself. So a few times a year, I do a full design and development, and I really enjoy it, even though most of the time I'm doing the coding. So just depending on the project, like, yeah, I can make those recommendations for them. Generally speaking, I kind of like when they come to me without a designer, because then like I can pick somebody who I know is a good designer. Sometimes like just like developers, like just like anybody, you know, there are good designers and bad designers. There are good copywriters and bad copywriters. So but sometimes the client's designer is awesome. So it can work in a lot of different ways. Like they can come to me with a team and they can come to me with nobody. And I can just you know, make recommendations and get the right people together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you and I have had some fun conversations around if we got this project, who's the designer that should be on the project with us, because it makes a huge difference to the entire collaboration. Everybody's in on the strategy from the beginning. We're getting a sense of the client's style and who's the right designer fit for that. Maybe it's you and maybe it's somebody else that we're bringing in, but it's like this whole matchmaking process that makes everything run so much smoother. So
yeah, and that's a good point too. I was talking, you know, there's not just like good and bad designers. It's also like there can be like a roster of wonderful designers and they all just do things a little bit differently. So yeah, that's a great point.
It's like it's style, it's personality, it's process, it's lots of things. Okay, so in a perfect world, a client's like, okay, I've got a sense of who's going to help me with these things, and they're able to come to you and say, now we're sort of ready to talk about the next piece. But what do they not need to know in advance? Like, what do you help them figure out as part of your work together, or even just like those first initial conversations?
Like they don't really have to have anything technical figured out. So they don't necessarily need to know like which system they want to use. Like, do we need to be on WordPress or Squarespace? Like, they don't have to come to me with that. I mean, if they do, that's great, but I can help make a recommendation for what's best for them. They don't necessarily have to have like their hosting and domains and stuff, you know, already set up. Like I can totally assist them on that. And they don't need to come to me with like a specific theme, you know, like they don't have to be like, I want this, you know, I can help them figure that out and maybe make something a little more custom and off the menu. So they don't have to have like any of that prepared.
Yeah, I really appreciate that about you, because I often come to you with prospective clients and say, all of this is uncertain. What would you advise? And then you are able to guide those really technical pieces or pieces that just aren't others' expertise, and bring a clarity and a simplicity and a sense of peacefulness and not terror around making those really confusing decisions.
Yeah, and I think the thing to know is that there's no like one solution that will work perfectly for everybody. And I'm never going to sell somebody on like working with me if I am not the right person. You know, if like a templated Squarespace site is the right thing, like I will say like, here are some wonderful Squarespace designers who you should talk to. So it's really just about like making the right match for the right people.
Yeah, that's everybody for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Avoids a lot of disappointment down the road.
Yes. And I know one piece of the puzzle is totally investment. And I know that also varies massively depending on scope, on complexity, even just like number of pages of the site, size of the site, functionality. So for educational purposes only, can you share a baseline investment a business should plan on for like full development, not including design?
Yeah. So like you said, it varies just wildly depending on projects. But I'd say for custom WordPress development, like you would want like a minimum of 10,000, but could be 10 to 15, let's say, as like the lower end. On, if you have like tons and tons of stuff, it could get definitely higher than that. And if you're looking lower than that, that's something where, semi-custom could be the perfect way to go as sort of like, a bridge between templated and custom.
Exactly. And then thinking about how you'll accomplish design in your budget in addition to that. Yep.
Yeah,
Perfect.
exactly.
Yeah. It's always great to just set expectations. And that way, everybody is able to come to the table with an understanding of where they're starting, and then you can make the right recommendation too.
Yeah, totally.
Great. Any final words of wisdom for hiring the right web professionals for the job? Like, what should clients look for? Any questions you think people should ask?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think one of the first things to keep in mind is that development, like you're going to be interacting with your developer a lot. So although you want them to be very technically talented, you also want them to be a kind and respectful person who can also talk to you about technology in like a kind and easy to understand way. And that's one piece of feedback that I've got from clients multiple times is like, wow, you're a lot nicer than our last developer and you don't talk down to me. And I'm like, wow, that's really sad that is happening. And I'm sure, and there's lots of nice developers out there, but definitely like look for good communication skills.
Yeah.
That is really important. Somebody who's not going to be just like talking jargon at you.
Yeah.
I think it just makes the whole experience a lot more pleasant and just smooth and easier to do. If you're working with a separate designer and developer, like if you already have a designer on your team or somebody you want to work with, like make sure that they and the developer are working together from the start, and that it's not just like one person passing the baton off to the other person with no communication. I think we had talked about that a little bit before, but that's where things can really break down.
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure that like the team is sort of all together.
Yeah.
Definitely look at their portfolio. So, like I said, ask to see something on the admin side, but also look on the front end too. Like if you're looking through your web developer's portfolio, like do the sites all load kind of slowly? Like, are there like weird gaps and inconsistencies? Like, do you see like a weird horizontal scroll bar like on the site? And test it look at a few different devices too. Like, does it feel good on a phone? So there's definitely things you can do to just sort of like snoop around. And I think just ask them also, ask them for a big project, like breakdown and timeline and everything, and also what support could look like after. So, like we talked about, some clients need more support going forward than others. Some people will want to fly on their own. Some people will want to have like a little more hand holding, and just make sure that that's something that your developer will offer.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
Yeah, I love all of that. That's so helpful.
And also make sure that they can help you with things like hosting and backups and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, just to, like that can also make or break a website. If you are on a very poor host that gets hacked a lot, the best developer can't stop that from happening. So you want someone who can also make those recommendations for you.
Yeah, I think all of what you just said is like a prospective client's bullet point list of questions for the next developer that they're going to reach out to. They'll be able to say, can you tell me about all of those things that you just listed? And that even if the client doesn't have necessarily the technical understanding, their ability to ask those questions and to see if they can understand the answers will enable them to find the right partner to help them through the process. So I really appreciate everything that you said. And you touched on it so briefly, but what I would add to it is you said, have a sense of what the timeline overall will look like. And I will add to it as a word of advice, don't wait until you needed your website yesterday, because the process from strategy, copy, design, and development, it's not a short process. If you're truly wanting to get a custom site that's well thought out, that functions beautifully, that looks beautiful, that attracts your ideal client, don't wait until you needed it yesterday.
That is wonderful advice. And sometimes, we've had a reaction like, wow, that seems like a really long time. Why? And then once we're in the middle of the process, like there is always an understanding of this is exactly why it took this long.
Yeah.
You know, like once we get going, it always makes sense. But at first they can be like, what? It's more than 2 months? Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be. It's
Yeah.
going to be. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Who is your ideal client right now?
That is a great question. I think in general, I just love working with clients who are putting some good out into the world and making the world a better place in some way. And I just really like helping them that way. So I'm just like very like purpose driven, and I really like working with those types of people. So I mean, that's a sort of generic thing. And people who want some cool web stuff.
Yeah.
To do that too. So yeah, those are my ideal clients. And also educational clients are my ideal clients too. I've been getting more into consulting and teaching. I really, really love teaching both clients and other developers.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've been shifting my focus into and really enjoying. So that's another ideal client as well.
That's say just a bit more about that, because I know you've led workshops, sort of teaching coding. And
Yeah.
so what would it look like on the client side if they needed somebody to consult with them?
Yeah, so I've had clients consult with me on everything from like, how do I speed my website up? Or like, how can I edit this a little bit easier? Sometimes I'm just giving them advice. Sometimes I'm doing like little code updates on their site to just help them alongside. And sometimes I'm also just consulting with other developers who, you know, maybe know how to use WordPress, but don't know how to build in the new block editor. So I can just show them and help them, you know, like level up those skills a little bit. So I like teaching both clients, and I also like teaching other developers too, who are like maybe like a little bit more beginner or junior and just like know how to do some stuff, but not everything. So yeah, I'm like both a developer and a teacher, and I really like both of those sides a lot.
Yeah. And I can't speak highly enough of your ability to educate to those who are less technically savvy than you. As the person who just learned the shortcut for turning on Do Not Disturb, it's been in my menu bar this whole time. But truly, you are really good at explaining really complex things. And I'm thinking about if somebody's listening or reading this and they're thinking, we've got a decent site now. We know that we've got a huge rebrand or big site reboot coming in the next year or 2 or 3, and it feels massively daunting to think about. You would be a fantastic person to spend some time with them, helping them figure out now what it is that they could do to help their current site function better, to sort of bridge the gap, but then also to help them figure out what they would need down the line potentially. So you could also help them get over that bridge in a much
in a smoother way.
Say it that way. Yes, in a smoother way. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for sharing more about that. That's really cool that you're doing that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I really love teaching and consulting, and just like showing people just showing people that things don't have to be scary.
Yeah.
Because I think that especially if you're not super technical and like you haven't used these tools before, it just feels so overwhelming. And it just makes me feel really happy when somebody walks away and they're like, this wasn't so bad. Like I can totally do this. Like it's very satisfying for all of us, I think.
Yeah, I personally have had several of those moments with you and WordPress over the years. So you've converted me. So yeah. So tell us what's next for you. What's something that you're really excited about coming up?
Sort of actually, it was just what I was talking about. I am taking on some more teaching gigs, and I'm just super excited about that. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to making that just a bigger part of my work week.
Yeah, that's so cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, well then let us know where people can find you, follow you online, and I'll make sure that everything's linked here.
Yeah, it's very easy because I have an uncommon name that it's available everywhere because nobody else has it. So my website is daraskolnick.com, and I am at Dara Skolnick on every single social media outlet. I'm on it, like I have a Twitter. I am not very active on it, so you don't really have to follow me there. But on the other ones, I am around.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll make sure they're connected here. Dara, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your insight with us. You're truly my tech guru, and I suspect you'll be others' tech gurus soon too. So thank you. This has been really illuminating.
Thanks. This was so much fun. I loved it.
Good, I'm glad. Well, to stay in touch with Dara and me, you can click the links below to follow us. Thank you for watching. Until next time.